going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. I am your host for today's video, Young RG, Robert Garcia, as Coach likes to call me. And in today's episode, we are going to be continuing on with our series of the biggest storylines, biggest questions that each team needs to answer. We are, of course, going division by division. And last week in my video, I talked about the AFC North. So in this week, it only seemed right that I would discuss the NFC North. And this was the division. This video, I was very looking forward to this video, very much looking forward to this video, because this is, universally regarded as the best division in football, with all four teams having a legitimate and realistic shot at making the playoffs. There's a lot to unpack. Obviously, three of these teams did make the playoffs last year, and the one team that didn't, obviously that being the Chicago Bears. I think they answered a lot of the questions they had going into this offseason, and certainly addressed a lot of the, positions of need. So we'll get right into it, starting with the Chicago Bears and what is the biggest question the Bears need to answer this season. And it's honestly pretty straightforward. I think Bears fans will agree with it. Can and will Ben Johnson unleash Caleb Williams? Caleb Williams, obviously very sought after, very highly, not highly expected, but highly awaited. That's the word I'm looking for. Highly awaited prospect. Everybody was hoping they were going to have the number one pick this season, and the Panthers could have had him had they not traded their first round pick to move up in the year prior's draft to draft Bryce Young first overall. So the Bears, pretty thankful for that, of course, that they were able to land him. And so obviously now he came into a position last season where, there was some pretty lofty expectations for him, as there usually are with number one overall picks. But most of the time with number one overall picks, they are going to the worst situation in football, obviously, because you were picking number one. You were the worst team last season. However, it was a different case with the Bears because, like we mentioned, they didn't actually earn, quote unquote, the number one overall first pick. They traded for it in the year prior, and they, Carolina was the worst team the year that they drafted Caleb. So that was how that was able to work. But all that being said, he did come in, and I think it's safe to say the expectations were not met. I think a lot of people were saying he was going to be the first quarterback finally to throw for 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and he was going to do it as a rookie. He certainly had the wide receivers to do it with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze, who they also drafted in the first round the year that they drafted Caleb. So it's just, he had a lot going for him, but where they were really lacking was, of course, the offensive line. And as a total unit, pass blocking and run blocking, it was ranked 17th in the league. So straight average. However, with the rushing stats, I should say, they were bottom third in the league in all three categories as far as rush yards per attempt, rush yards per game, and the amount of rush attempts per game. So obviously they were not trying to run the ball. They were a very one-dimensional team last season. And when you're a one-dimensional team, especially with a young quarterback, especially with a rookie quarterback, it is going to be very tough for you to win games. And they were off to a great start. They were 4-2 and a Hail Mary catch away from 5-2. And so, it really just goes to show that, they were certainly high to start the season, the first month and a half at least. And then that Hail Mary sort of just kind of derailed any and everything that, any and all great positive momentum that they had for them. And so, yeah, it was ultimately doomed. But I think that with the Bears this season, I think Ben Johnson was the hire to make. I think they nailed that hire. No doubt in my mind about that. And then with their new additions, as far as trading for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, two guards, and then also improving that center position with Drew Dahlman coming over from Atlanta. I think the Bears will make a huge improvement this year. And I think it's going to be a dogfight. I mean, if the Bears can be much more competitive than they were last season, and even if these other three teams in the division just stay the same, it is going to be a bloodbath come, January and seeing where these teams are ranked and the whole NFC really. So it's definitely going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, this is the biggest question for the Bears. Is Ben Johnson going to unleash Caleb, and will these offseason additions prove fruitful? Moving on to the team that finished first in the division last year, we have the Detroit Lions. And now, what is the biggest question that they need to be answering this season? And in my opinion, it's going to be how much will the departure of both coordinators hinder their success this season? Obviously, talking about the previously aforementioned Ben Johnson and, of course, Aaron Glenn, who both got head coaching opportunities this season. Like I mentioned, one with the Bears in a division and the other with the cross-conference New York Jets. And so I think we obviously saw, and the biggest comparison that a lot of people are making for this Lions team is that Eagles team that did in fact lose both coordinators in the following season, although they still made the playoffs. It was a really rough season in terms of offensive game plans, passing coordination. There was just a lot to look back on that season and a lot to forget. However, the Eagles, of course, found it and, got the right coordinators in place. Fangio had Kellen Moore, things like that, who they eventually lost as well. But that just goes to show you that they did go through the muck a bit after losing both their coordinators ultimately to head coaching position. So I think the Lions are going to take a similar sort of step back this season. Again, not saying that they're going to completely fall off and miss the playoffs entirely. Like I mentioned, the Eagles, even after losing both coordinators, still made the playoffs that season, albeit in a much weaker division because at the time, Jaden Daniels wasn't there. Cowboys were, still kind of good, but not, they're the Cowboys. And then it's obviously the Giants. So not much competition for the Eagles in the season that it happened for them. A lot tougher division for the Lions this time around. So I do think, although they will take a step back, it may be even a slightly bigger step back than the Eagles took in their season. But, after winning 15 games, you're almost bound to take a step back. It's insanely hard to improve when you can only improve by winning one or two more games and two more games away from a perfect season. So with that all being said, I do think the Lions will, take their lumps this season. I do still love this team and the way it's assembled. They have one of the best O-lines in the sport. They have one of the best 1-2 running back punches with Jahmyr Gibbs and, of course, David Montgomery. Have amazing weapons outside with Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams. Isaac Tesla has been balling out in preseason for them, not even to mention Sam Laporta. And then, of course, that defense that was insanely injury-riddled last season is getting a lot of guys back. They're getting Aiden Hutchinson back. Like I mentioned, though, losing both coordinators, that is going to affect them. I'm sure of it. But I think this team is talented enough and they have a good enough leadership, and obviously with Dan Campbell there, that it will not be as bad as a lot of people are expecting. 15 wins last season. I can maybe see them winning up 10 games. Now I know that seems like a massive step back, but I also feel like 15 games, winning 15 games for them last season was, I don't want to say the peak, but it was the peak of that coaching staff and what they were able to do. So I do think they're just bound to take a step back. Again, I do think the Lions will be competitive this season. No doubt in my mind. I don't think they're just going to fall over and die, barring injuries, massive injuries. But I also think that they have great depth. They just need to be not as injured as they were last season. But I do think they can compete. I think they will compete. I just think it's going to be a much tougher road than it was last season, and that was even with the losses of a lot of these defensive players. Moving on now to the next team in this division, the team that finished, second in this division last year with a 14-3 record. That is the Minnesota Vikings. And now, what is the biggest question the Vikings need to answer? This one is also pretty straightforward. Similar to the Bears, they drafted a young QB in that draft of Caleb Williams, the 2023 draft, 24. Oh man, I'm losing my mind. 2024 draft. And they took a quarterback, obviously, J.J. McCarthy. And so that is going to be the biggest question for them. Is he the franchise quarterback Kevin O'Connell's been searching for? They, thought he was the season they drafted him, of course. Injury in the preseason, of course, derailed and ultimately ended his rookie season. However, I still consider him a rookie. He has yet to snap a ball in a regular season NFL game. So with all that being said, he is still a rookie in my eyes, although technically he's in his second year. But yeah, this is a pretty obvious one as well. Like I said, when you have young quarterbacks, with teams that have some pretty high expectations, and the Vikings certainly fit the bill with, like I mentioned, winning 14 games last season. The pressure and the questions certainly are on that position. And of course, JJ McCarthy, with as good as Sam Darnold played last season, with how well this offense performed and with how well that defense performed, I think the expectations for JJ McCarthy this year are certainly playoffs. I think it's certainly double-digit wins. Will he reach that? I'm not quite sure. I personally am not the biggest JJ McCarthy fan. However, that team around him is so damn good that it's almost hard. Like, you almost have to think he just has to not play like trash. If he can just not turn the ball over, and like we mentioned, this offense, and I think I'm sure I even mentioned it in the preview or in the offseason review video that we did, the offseason grades video talking about the Vikings. It's just going to be a matter of, can JJ drive this Ferrari of a team and not crash it? Just keep it in neutral, keep it, on cruise control. You're going to go a nice 75, 80 down the freeway. Maybe at times you're going to maybe need to kick it up to about 90 or so. But I think he can do that. I think Kevin O'Connell has set up this team for success. Clearly, with Sam Darnold last season leading this team to 14 wins, and I think it just makes all the sense in the world. There was the questions about, were they going to move on from Darnold after that season he had, with JJ McCarthy kind of waiting on the back burner. Obviously, that answered their question. They believe in this kid, and it makes sense. They took him 10th overall. So I think he is in a great position to succeed. I don't think he'll be an, top 10 elite, ish range, that kind of franchise QB, but I do think he can be a franchise QB in the sense of he will fit this offense well. And obviously, when you have Justin Jefferson out wide, and even Jordan Addison is a great, wide receiver too as well. But obviously, Justin Jefferson, the big, ticket item there, and you have this solid run game, and you have the good defense, you have the good O-line. I think there's just so many pieces in place for this team to succeed, and it's almost going to be, again, this is just going to be kind of with every team, injuries that will be the only reason this team gets derailed this season, or unless JJ McCarthy is just an absolute dumpster fire and they were completely wrong in taking him, they maybe should have stuck with Darnold. That's going to be the biggest thing. I can maybe alter this question maybe a little bit more to say, will the gamble, quote unquote, for the Vikings pay off with letting Sam Darnold go? Because if Sam Darnold goes out and balls in Seattle, which a lot of people don't think he will, the Vikings are going to be, and Kevin O'Connell, maybe even the GM especially, will be in some deep, deep water. So for the GM's sake, for O'Connell's sake, for Vikings fans' sake, JJ McCarthy needs to be this franchise quarterback that this team has so desperately been searching for. And I can't even remember when the last time they had a franchise QB was. Teddy B until he got hurt. I mean, I truly don't know when the last time they had it is. They've always just been able to make it work with plug and play guys. Kirk Cousins, quote unquote, was your franchise quarterback for 2 years, 3 years. But yeah, I think that's ultimately the biggest question for the Vikings this season. Moving on now to the last playoff team and the last team in this division that we are going to be going over, and that is the Green Bay Packers. And what is the biggest question that they need to answer this season? And it also has to do with a recent draft pick. And their biggest question is Matthew Golden the wide receiver one that they have been searching for? Obviously, biggest storyline for the Packers this offseason was the fact that they drafted a first-round wide receiver for the first time since I think it was 2002. I can't even remember the name of the receiver they drafted because he really didn't turn out to be that great. However, that was the last time they drafted a wide receiver in the first round. So Vikings fans absolutely rejoiced when they heard, this name called by Roger Goodell. Finally, the streak has ended. They have their quote unquote wide receiver one. They hope. I think Matthew Golden is a fantastic wide receiver, someone that I was, potentially kind of hoping the Chargers might take a peek at, and they had a chance. He was there for them to draft at 22. Packers right behind them at 23. Chargers obviously go Hampton. It's not really much of a tough decision for the Packers. With Matthew Golden there, they scoop him up. And I think Jordan Love has to be ecstatic about this. You have a room full of wide receiver twos. in Christian Dobbs, or Christian Dobbs, combining wide receivers, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed. So they have a lot of guys there that are kind of gadget, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, kind of, I don't want to say trick play, but, niche guys that can do certain things very well. I think Matthew Golden is a guy that can do a lot of things very well. I think he can be Jordan Love's number 1 target this season. A lot of people have been saying that Matthew Golden potentially is just another wide receiver 2 that they drafted into this wide receiver 2 room. Now that might not be a horrible thing, but you really do need one guy to kind of take that step above the rest and really cement himself as the go-to target for Jordan Love. And, potentially Tucker Kraft maybe becomes that, weapon 1. I kind of use that term loosely when I talk about wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. Can he be the number 1 option in this offense and let the other 4 wide receivers kind of, work around him, similar to what the Chiefs did with Travis Kelce for all those years? They obviously had Tyreek as well, but for the most part, it was Travis Kelce's, he was the fixation for defenses going into the Chiefs games. So, can he take that next step forward and let these other guys kind of develop around him? Will Matthew Golden take that step forward and let Tucker Kraft, so there's a lot of options that the Packers can go with here. They obviously still have Josh Jacobs and that great sound running game. The defense played pretty sound and pretty good last season as well. They obviously do lose Jair Alexander for essentially nothing in the offseason. So that does hurt a lot. And I do think, with the improvements that the Bears have made, we already talked about, the step backs that the Vikings or the Lions potentially might take. We don't know about JJ and, what the Vikings will do with him. But there's a lot of things that the other teams in this division have going on as well. So the Packers, like I mentioned at the start of this video, this is the best division in football at the moment. So they are 1,000% going to be competing for a playoff spot this season. They're going to be competing for the division this season. But this is also, I could have also phrased this question a little bit differently, a little, I guess, peeking into my head a little bit. Another question I was considering for them, what was going to be, is Jordan Love the guy? But I kind of framed it this way because I do think Love, has shown a lot. I don't think the Packers were right to give him that contract so early on. However, this is why I am always a big fan, and I'm a firm believer that when you draft a quarterback in the first round, at the very least, you cannot sit him for more than a season, because you need to see very quickly what you have. And if you have something great, you need to then build around him ASAP and try to use that time you have him under a rookie contract to your benefit. We're at a point now for the Packers where, yeah, they had the one good season that there was no expectations when Jordan Love took over for the first time. They had the big playoff upset against the Cowboys, and obviously ended up losing the following week to, was it the Eagles? I can't remember who they played after the Cowboys that season, but they do end up losing the following week. But that's fine. You have no expectations going into that season. However, now you have expectations, but now you had to pay Jordan Love immediately after that because he was already in his 5th-year option. So this is just kind of the downside to drafting a quarterback and having him sit for 2 to 3 years, is because when you do finally see him, if you see greatness or you see good things out of him, good qualities, you're going to want to sign him early. But are you ready to commit that much money with only that little of game film? So that's all, another question that we could look at for the Packers, but I wanted to take the load off of Jordan Love this time around and just kind of place it around this wide receiver group. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Please give me your feedback. What are your biggest questions for each of these teams going into the season? Do you agree with my biggest questions? Let me know the answer to these questions down below. Also, be sure to check out all of our socials for the gang and myself. Mike Dubb, the Real AG, Alex Gibbons, and myself, Young RG. And also be sure to check out the Lockdown Defense Sports Network on all of our different connections and platforms. We are on Twitter, I'll always do that, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and of course, Gmail. And also the YouTube comments, guys. Send us all your ideas. What do you want to see? We're here to produce this content for you. The football season is right around the corner. We have one more week of preseason football, guys, and then we are right there in the thick of it with the first game of the season, of course, being the Eagles and Cowboys. following it up right after that with Chargers Chiefs. So be sure to stick around. Make sure to hit subscribe. Stick around on this channel. We're going to be posting content weekly during the NFL season, as well as having a couple of live shows as well. So with all that being said, guys, thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.